My wife died on a Tuesday morning. By Friday afternoon, I was sitting alone at our dining room table trying to figure out how to pay for a funeral I'd never imagined planning by myself. For 31 years, Emily handled every bill in our house. Not because I couldn't, but because she loved organizing everything into color-coded folders. She used to joke that if she died first, I'd spend 6 months trying to remember the password to our bank account. She was wrong. It only took me 15 minutes. What took much longer was understanding what I found after I logged in. If stories about hidden family secrets and impossible betrayals interest you, subscribe. Some truths don't come out until the person who buried them is gone. The checking account looked normal. Mortgage, utilities, insurance, groceries. Then I opened our retirement savings account. At first, nothing seemed unusual. The balance was much lower than I expected. But hospitals, medications, and cancer treatments had drained our savings during the last 2 years. That made sense. Then I clicked on the transaction history. The same payment appeared every single month. $2,400. Always on the third day of the month. 19 years. Never skipped. Never changed. Same recipient. M. Carter. I frowned. Carter wasn't Emily's last name. It wasn't mine. It wasn't anyone I recognized. I clicked on the earliest transaction. 19 years earlier. Exactly 1 month after our wedding anniversary. My first thought was simple. Maybe it was an investment account. Emily loved certificates of deposit and mutual funds. Maybe she'd opened something without telling me. I searched through the account description. No investment, just electronic transfers. Every month. 19 years. Almost $550,000 altogether. My mouth went dry. $500,000. I read the number 3 times before it finally settled into my head. $500,000 had quietly left our marriage. I picked up my phone and called the bank. The representative was polite but firm. "I'm sorry, Mr. Bennett, but I can't disclose information about another person's account." "I understand." I rubbed my forehead. "Can you at least tell me if this is a business?" A pause. "No, sir." "So it's a private individual?" Another pause. "I'm afraid that's all I can say." That was enough. It wasn't a retirement fund. It wasn't an investment. It was a person. I printed every transaction before closing my laptop. The stack of papers looked too thin to carry 19 years of lies. The funeral was the following Monday. People said all the things people always say. She was so kind. She always remembered birthdays. She loved everyone. I nodded politely. By then, I'd memorized the name. M. Carter. Every conversation happened in the background, while those 2 words echoed in my head. Near the end of the service, Emily's older cousin Diane hugged me. She whispered something I almost missed. "I hope they'll be okay." I pulled back. "I'm sorry?" She looked surprised. "The kids." I blinked. "What kids?" For a second, the color disappeared from her face. She stared at me as though I'd spoken another language. "You didn't know?" Before I could answer, someone called her name from across the church. She squeezed my arm. "I'm sorry." Then she walked away. I stood there frozen while people continued filing past Emily's casket. The kids. What kids? That evening I drove home alone. The silence inside the house felt heavier than it had all week. Emily's coffee mug still sat beside the sink. Her reading glasses rested on the nightstand, exactly where she'd left them before going to the hospital for the last time. I couldn't bring myself to move either one. Instead, I carried the funeral flowers into the kitchen. One card slipped off the arrangement and landed on the floor. It wasn't addressed to me. It simply read, "Mom, I hope you finally found peace." No signature, just one handwritten letter. I stared at the card for nearly a minute. Mom. Not Emily, Mom. I turned it over. Nothing. No return address, no last name, just one letter. That night I barely slept. Around 2:30 in the morning, I got out of bed and walked into Emily's sewing room. She always kept everything perfectly organized. Thread by color, patterns in labeled drawers, receipts clipped together by year. I opened one cabinet after another. Nothing. Family photos, vacation albums, tax returns, medical bills. Then I noticed something strange. One drawer was locked, not with a key, with a tiny combination lock. I had lived in that house for 31 years. I had never seen that lock before. I tried our anniversary. Nothing. Emily's birthday. Nothing. My birthday. Nothing. The day we got married. Still nothing. I sat there on the floor, staring at that little metal lock. Emily had never hidden anything from me. At least, I thought she hadn't. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store for bolt cutters. As I placed them on the counter, Frank looked at me. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just cleaning out some old cabinets." He nodded. "You know." He hesitated. "Emily always said she was good at keeping secrets." I laughed automatically. "She did?" "Oh, sure," he chuckled. "She'd say, 'Some promises last longer if only one person knows them.'" I smiled because that seemed like the appropriate response. Inside, something tightened. What promises? And why had only one person known them? I drove home, carried the bolt cutters into the sewing room, and stared at that locked drawer for almost 5 full minutes. Finally, I squeezed the handles. The lock snapped open. Inside wasn't jewelry. It wasn't cash. It wasn't another bank account. There was only a single large manila envelope. Across the front, in Emily's handwriting, were 6 words that made my knees feel weak. "Open only after I'm gone." I didn't open the envelope right away. I carried it downstairs, set it on the kitchen table, and made coffee first. That was something Emily always did before dealing with bad news. "Never read difficult things on an empty stomach," she'd say. I wasn't hungry. I barely tasted the coffee. For almost 20 minutes, I simply stared at the envelope. 31 years together. One sealed packet. 6 handwritten words. Open only after I'm gone. Finally, I slid a letter opener beneath the flap. Inside were several neatly folded documents tied together with a blue ribbon. On top sat a handwritten letter. Not dear Michael, not my husband. Just, if you're reading this, I've already run out of time. I felt my chest tighten. Emily's handwriting looked exactly the same as it always had. Careful, rounded letters without a single word crossed out. If you're reading this, I've already run out of time. I know you'll be angry before you finish the first page. You deserve to be. Everything I did began with love, but somewhere along the way, love became fear, and fear became lies. I stopped reading. I looked around our kitchen. Nothing had changed. The refrigerator still held the grocery list she'd written 2 weeks before she died. Her cardigan still hung over the chair. The clock still ticked. Only I had changed. I forced myself to continue. Before I met you, I was married once. I frowned. I already knew that. Emily had mentioned a short marriage when we first started dating. She always described it as a mistake she'd made in her early 20s. Nothing more. I kept reading. You asked if we had children. I told you no. That was my first lie. Everything inside me went perfectly still. My eyes stayed fixed on the sentence. I read it again. Then again. She continued. When my first marriage ended, my ex-husband received full custody. I was 25, I was broke, I was ashamed. I believed I would rebuild my life and come back for them. Instead, the years kept passing. By the time I met you, I was terrified that telling you the truth would cost me the only stable life I'd ever found. My hands started shaking. Children. Not one. More than one. I turned the page. There was a photograph paper-clipped to the back. A little boy, a little girl, both smiling into the camera. Emily looked at least 15 years younger. She had one arm around each child. On the back she'd written, Aaron, 8, Lily, 6. I stared at the names. Aaron, Lily, real names, real children. Not a misunderstanding, not a distant cousin, children, her children. The next page hit even harder. I never stopped loving them. I never stopped helping them. I know you believe we've been saving for retirement. I'm sorry. Some of that money went to them. Some? I reached for the printed bank statements lying beside the envelope. $500,000. Some wasn't the word I would have chosen. Emily continued. Please don't blame them. They didn't ask me to hide them. In fact, I swallowed. They believe you always knew. I actually laughed. It wasn't amusement. It was disbelief. I laughed because my mind refused to accept what I was reading. They thought, I knew? How? Why? The next paragraph answered that question. I told them you preferred not to be involved. I couldn't bear for them to think I'd abandoned them twice. I slowly lowered the letter. For nearly 20 years, two completely different families had existed. Mine and theirs, each believing a different version of reality. I walked outside without even realizing it. The afternoon sun felt strangely bright. Our neighbor, Mrs. Keller, waved from across the street. You doing all right? I almost answered honestly. Instead, I smiled. I've had better weeks. She nodded sympathetically. I imagine. If only she knew. That evening, I couldn't stop looking through the envelope. There were birthday cards Emily had received, school photographs, graduation announcements, wedding invitations, every milestone, every birthday, every Christmas, every page of a life I'd never known existed. Then I found something else. Bank receipts, neatly organized, year by year. Emily had kept every transfer, every single one. Sometimes she'd written little notes. Aaron needed braces, Lily's tuition, first apartment deposit, emergency surgery, new baby. New baby? I flipped back. There was another photograph. Emily holding an infant. The caption underneath read, My first grandson. I sat down so abruptly the chair scraped across the hardwood floor. She had a grandson. I had spent 23 Christmas mornings beside her. Not once had she mentioned becoming a grandmother. My phone rang. It was Diane, Emily's cousin. I've been thinking about what happened at the funeral. So have I. I shouldn't have said anything. No. I looked toward the envelope. But you did. Silence. Finally, she asked quietly, She left you the letters? There were letters? Diane sighed. There should have been several. Several. I looked inside the envelope again. Only one letter. Documents, photos, receipts. No other letters. Diane, my voice sounded strangely calm. How many children did Emily have? A long silence. Then, 2. I closed my eyes. I know that now. Another pause. You really didn't know? It wasn't a question anymore. "No," she whispered. "Oh, Emily." Then she started crying. After a minute, she finally spoke again. "They loved her. I don't doubt that. They wanted to meet you years ago." My heart skipped. "What?" "They asked her over and over." I gripped the phone tighter. "What did she tell them?" Another long silence. Finally, Diane answered. She said, "You never wanted another family." I felt something inside me crack, not because it was true, because somewhere, 2 children had spent nearly 2 decades believing I had rejected them, without ever knowing my name, without me ever knowing theirs. I walked back into the kitchen. The envelope still lay open on the table. Underneath the photographs, I noticed something I hadn't seen before. A folded sheet of paper tucked beneath the last receipt. It wasn't handwritten. It was printed. A legal document. Across the top, in bold letters, were the words, "Beneficiary Designation." My eyes moved to the highlighted line. The primary beneficiaries of Emily Bennett's life insurance policy were not her husband. They were Aaron Carter, Lily Carter. I stopped breathing. Then I noticed something even stranger. The document had been updated just 6 weeks before Emily died. I read the beneficiary form 5 times before I accepted what it said. Emily had updated it 6 weeks before she died. Not 6 years. Not before we were married. 6 weeks. While I was driving her to chemotherapy. While I was sleeping in a hospital chair. While we were still talking about repainting the kitchen next spring. I searched the envelope again, convinced I'd missed another letter. There had to be an explanation. Instead, another folded sheet slipped onto the table. It was from the insurance company. The policy hadn't been changed completely. 90% would go to Aaron and Lily. 10% to me. Not because I was her husband, because I was listed as the person responsible for paying the funeral expenses. I laughed once, a short, empty laugh. 31 years of marriage, 10%. That afternoon, I drove to Richard Collins' office. Richard had been our attorney for almost 20 years. He handled our wills, the refinance on our house, and Emily's medical directives. When I walked in, he stood immediately. "Michael." He shook my hand with both of his. "I'm sorry about Emily." "So am I." He motioned toward the chair. "What can I do for you?" Without saying a word, I placed the beneficiary form on his desk. He adjusted his glasses. His expression changed almost immediately. "I assume this is why you're here." "You knew." His eyes met mine. "I knew Emily updated several documents." "You knew who Aaron and Lily were?" Richard hesitated. "I knew they were her children." The room became painfully quiet. "You never thought I deserved to know?" "I wasn't allowed to tell you." "Because of attorney-client privilege?" "Yes." I leaned back. For a moment I wanted to be angry at him, but he hadn't lied to me. Emily had. "There is something else," Richard said quietly. "I don't think you're going to like it." I almost smiled. "I haven't liked anything for 3 days." He opened a folder. "Emily asked me to give you this only if you came here." He slid another sealed envelope across the desk. Again, another letter. Another secret. My hands suddenly felt tired. I broke the seal. "Michael, if you're reading this, then you've already learned about Aaron and Lily. I know you'll think I loved them more than you. That isn't true. I loved you differently." I stopped. Different. What an impossible word. I didn't leave them money because I loved you less. I left them money because I stole something from them that I can never give back. I continued reading. I missed Aaron's high school graduation. I wasn't there when Lily had her first baby. I wasn't there when either of them needed their mother most. Money was the only thing I knew how to give them. I lowered the page. For the first time, I felt something besides anger, not forgiveness, understanding. There is a difference. Richard watched quietly. Finally, he asked, "Do you want some coffee?" "No. You've barely spoken. I'm trying to decide whether my marriage was real." He didn't answer. There wasn't a good answer. Before I left, Richard handed me a business card. "Emily asked me to keep this." I looked down. A therapist, family mediation. On the back, Emily had written 3 words, "if they're willing." "They?" Richard nodded slowly. "Aaron and Lily." I stared at him. She expected me to meet them? She hoped. Hoped? She never knew if you'd forgive her. I drove home in complete silence. Halfway there, my phone rang, unknown number. Normally, I would have ignored it. Instead, I answered. "Hello?" For several seconds, nothing, just breathing. Then a man's voice, quiet, careful. "Is this Michael Bennett?" "Yes." "My name is Aaron." Everything inside me froze. Neither of us spoke. Finally, he said, "I wasn't sure you'd answer. I wasn't sure you existed." Silence. Long enough that I wondered if the call had disconnected. Then he laughed softly. "My wife said you'd probably say something like that." "You have a wife?" 22 years. I nodded automatically before realizing he couldn't see me. "You have children?" "I have 2 daughters." "Granddaughters." Emily had never told me. I couldn't finish the sentence. Aaron understood anyway. "I know. I didn't call about the money," he said. "I figured. I called because Mom wanted us to meet." The word mom still sounded strange. He continued. "She kept saying there wasn't enough time." I looked at the road ahead. There wasn't. "No." Another silence. Then he asked the question I'd been dreading. "Did she ever tell you about us?" I could have lied. It would have been easy. It would have protected his memory of her. Instead, I told the truth. No. His breathing changed, almost like someone had punched him. "What?" "I found out after the funeral." He didn't answer. Then I heard another voice in the background. A woman, probably his wife. "What did he say?" Aaron whispered something I couldn't hear. Then, nothing. Nearly 30 seconds of complete silence. Finally, he spoke again. "We thought," his voice cracked, "we thought you hated us." I closed my eyes. "No." "Mom always said you didn't want another family." "No." "She said you knew about us." "No." "She said meeting us would destroy your marriage." My grip tightened around the steering wheel. "I never even knew your names." This time, the silence lasted almost a minute. When Aaron finally spoke again, he sounded like a different man. "So," he whispered, "she lied to all of us." We agreed to meet the following Saturday. Neutral place. A small cafe halfway between our towns. Neither of us wanted the first meeting to happen in someone's house. Before hanging up, Aaron said something that stayed with me all week. "My sister doesn't think you knew." "What do you mean?" "She stopped believing Mom years ago." "Why?" Another pause. "Because," he took a slow breath, "she found a birthday card addressed to you." "What birthday card?" "Mom bought it." He hesitated. "But she never mailed it." "For me?" "No." "For you?" Another silence. "From us." I pulled my car onto the shoulder. "What?" "It was signed," he swallowed. "Love, Aaron and Lily." I couldn't speak. For almost 20 years. Somewhere. A birthday card had existed. written by two people who believed I didn't want them, bought by a woman who knew I would never even see it. Aaron's final words before ending the call were almost a whisper. I think Mom spent 30 years trying to protect everyone and ended up making strangers out of all of us. I arrived at the cafe 20 minutes early, not because I was eager, because I wasn't sure I'd have the courage to walk in if I sat in the parking lot too long. I ordered black coffee. It went cold before anyone opened the front door. At exactly 11 o'clock, a man about my age stepped inside. He paused just inside the entrance and looked around. Our eyes met. I knew immediately. Not because he looked like Emily, because he smiled the way she did when she wasn't sure she was welcome. He walked over slowly. Michael? I stood. Aaron. Neither of us knew whether to shake hands. He solved the problem by extending his hand anyway. His grip was firm, but uncertain. It feels strange finally meeting you. I was thinking the same thing. He laughed quietly. We've technically known about each other for 19 years. Only one of us did. His smile disappeared. Yeah. A few minutes later, the front door opened again. A woman with silver beginning to show in her dark hair stepped inside. She looked directly at Aaron, then at me, her eyes immediately filled with tears. Lily? She nodded. You really didn't know. Not even hello, just those 4 words. I answered honestly. No. She closed her eyes. I kept telling him. She pointed toward Aaron. I told him something never made sense. Aaron looked embarrassed. I wanted to believe Mom. So did I, Lily replied softly. We talked for almost 2 hours. Not about money. Not at first. About Emily. They told me she never missed a birthday after they became adults. She called every Sunday evening. She sent homemade cookies every Christmas. She remembered every anniversary, every promotion, every grandchild's birthday. Then they asked me about my life. I showed them photographs from our vacations. Emily standing beside the Grand Canyon. Emily laughing on a fishing pier in Maine. Emily planting roses behind our house. Lily stared at one picture for a long time. She never showed us these. Aaron nodded. She always said she didn't want to hurt us. I looked up. She told me almost nothing about you. Lily smiled sadly. And she told us almost nothing about you. We sat there surrounded by photographs of the same woman. None of us recognized the life she'd hidden from the others. Eventually, Aaron asked the question everyone had been avoiding. What are you going to do about the insurance? I looked at him. I haven't decided. Lily immediately shook her head. If you're thinking about challenging it, I'm not. Both of them looked surprised. I continued. Your mother made that decision. Aaron lowered his eyes. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't have to. It was your money too. I thought about all the overtime shifts, the vacations we skipped, the truck I never replaced, the retirement we'd postponed every few years. Then I looked at the man and woman sitting across from me. Neither of them had asked for any of it. No, I said quietly. It wasn't your lie. A week later, I met Richard again. I've made my decision. He folded his hands. I'm listening. I'm not contesting the policy. He nodded once. I thought you might say that. But I do want one thing. What? I want every remaining document. Every letter. Every photograph. Everything Emily left behind. Richard disappeared into the back room. When he returned, he carried a small storage box. She asked me to wait 6 months. I frowned. Why? He smiled sadly. She hoped all 3 of you would be ready by then. That evening, the 3 of us sat in my living room. The storage box rested on the coffee table. None of us touched it for several minutes. Finally, Lily opened it. Inside were dozens of sealed envelopes, each one labeled in Emily's handwriting. For Michael, for Aaron, for Lily, and one final envelope, larger than the others. Across the front were 4 words. Read this together. Aaron looked at me. You should. I opened it. Inside was only 1 page. If the 3 of you are sitting together, then something happened that I spent 31 years believing was impossible. Maybe you're angry. Maybe you're disappointed. You have every right to be. But if you're together, then you've already done something I never had the courage to do. You chose the truth. I chose fear. Fear protected me for a little while. The truth would have hurt all of us, but my lies hurt you for decades. I'm sorry, there was nothing else. No explanation, no request for forgiveness. Just, I'm sorry. Over the next several months, something unexpected happened. Not instantly, not dramatically, slowly. Aaron and I started having breakfast every other Saturday. Lily began calling when she tried one of Emily's old recipes and couldn't remember one ingredient. At Thanksgiving, all of us met at my house, the same dining room where I'd once believed only 2 people had built a life together. Aaron's daughters came. Lily's grandchildren ran through the backyard. Someone laughed exactly the way Emily used to. For just a second, I had to step outside. Not because I was angry, because grief is strange. It can arrive disguised as happiness. People have asked whether I ever forgave Emily. The answer isn't simple. I forgave the frightened young woman who thought one lie would buy her a better future. I'm not sure I'll ever forgive the wife who spent 31 years adding another lie every month. Both women were Emily. I loved both. Only one of them truly trusted me. Last month, I finally closed our retirement account. There wasn't enough money left to retire the way we'd planned. I should have felt bitter. Instead, I wrote 3 checks. One to Aaron's oldest daughter for college, one to Lily's grandson for a savings account, and one to the local cancer center where Emily had spent her final months. Not because I was trying to honor the lie, because I wanted the last financial decision connected to her name to be one we never had to hide. These days, her old coffee mug still sits beside my kitchen sink. I haven't moved it. Some mornings I make 1 cup of coffee. Some mornings I make 3. The mug reminds me that love can survive the truth, but trust cannot survive a lifetime of silence. About a year after we first met, Aaron called me on a Thursday afternoon. Are you busy next weekend? Not unless you're about to volunteer me for something. He laughed. No. Lily and I were cleaning out Mom's old storage unit. And? We found something with your name on it. I drove over Saturday morning expecting another box of papers. Instead, Aaron handed me a small wooden case. Inside was an old wristwatch, the one my father had given me before he passed away. I'd searched for it for years. Emily had always insisted it must have been lost during one of our moves. Beneath it was a tiny folded note. I borrowed this the week before our wedding because I wanted to have it restored as a surprise for our anniversary. Then life became complicated. Every year I meant to give it back. Every year I was more ashamed that I hadn't. I'm sorry for this, too. I smiled despite myself. Some secrets had been enormous. Others had simply grown too heavy to admit. Aaron looked at me. What are you thinking? I fastened the watch around my wrist. I'm thinking your mother had far too many unopened conversations. He nodded. So, he hesitated. Dinner next Sunday? I looked around the room. At Aaron, at Lily, at the grandchildren arguing over a board game in the next room. "Yeah," I said. "I'll bring dessert." For the first time in decades, there were no hidden accounts, no secret envelopes, and no separate lives. Just one table, and enough chairs for everyone.